Today's guest is Chris Kito. At the age of 24, Chris went into anaphylactic shock from a food allergy, and it led him into a life-changing near-death experience. He will be discussing the events leading up to the NDE, the near-death experience itself, and its after effects upon him, and how he has been integrating the experience into his life both personally and professionally. Chris will also discuss the opportunities and challenges this life-altering event and how it affects individuals entering adulthood. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you giving me some of your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be on the show with you.
All right. My guests love hearing about NDEs, and you had one at 24, so you went into anaphylactic shock. Are you allergic to nuts or something, or what happened?
I am. Like millions of other people in the world, I have a very severe allergy to peanuts and tree nuts, which I had since I was very, very young, which I was fully always aware of.
Mm-hmm. You said peanuts and tree nuts?
Yes. So there's peanuts that are in the ground, and there's tree nuts like walnuts or cashews. So there's two families of nuts.
Oh.
And someone could have an allergy to peanuts, but they could eat almonds or walnuts and have no issue, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So in the allergy community, it's always broken up as a peanut and or tree nut allergy.
Oh, wow. So basically you can't eat any nuts, right?
No, I can't eat anything. I'm allergic to everything, and then some other foods I have some sensitivities to.
Right.
But primarily my anaphylactic reaction, which in the allergy community is the most significant, the most severe and life-threatening, is to peanuts and tree nuts.
Okay. So what had happened? Did you just happen to eat something that you didn't know there were nuts inside of it?
Yeah, pretty much. So, I'll go into the story of how this happened. So, when I go into my NDE story, this is something I never spoke about. It happened about 8.5 years ago. And I attempted to speak about it within a year or two after the incident. And I really was not able to come up with the language. And even now, speaking with you, and if you've said you've interviewed other NDEers, it's very difficult to retell as accurate as possible due to not having the language to describe the situation, the after effects, the being in the moment, the actual near-death experience. The language is very limiting. So I'm going to do my best to, describe in detail, pivotal moments in my NDE experience, the after effects, dealing with it and going through all of that. And if I pause at all during that, I'm really just trying to really boil down the best way to describe it to you and your audience.
Right.
So if there are some pauses, it's just part of trying to put in, and even 8.5 years later, only 6 months ago, I really started speaking about this publicly, where many of my closest friends and families never knew the full story. So this is still very, very new. And I just, there will be pauses, and I'm still integrating and working through a lot of this experience as well. So I was born and raised in Long Island, New York, and I went to school in Connecticut. Then after school, I decided I wanted to head west. Always living and being on the East Coast and finishing up school there, I went to Los Angeles, California. I was in LA for about 6 months, and I was at a friend's birthday party on a Sunday evening. Now, many people know in LA that, the traffic is pretty awful, and it is. And, the reason it was a Sunday night will come into effect later on in the story. So we're at a birthday party, and nothing out of the ordinary, probably 35, 40 people there. We're at a small boutique hotel, and it was a gathering. Everyone was around. I wasn't drinking at all. I was just there meeting people, talking in the moment of being around everybody. And they start to cut up cake. And, I bring up the reason of not drinking, that I was fully aware. And anyone that has allergies knows that anytime you're ever around food or peanuts or nuts or whatever they may be, there's always a potential risk. In this moment, looking back 8 years later, 8.5 years later, you kind of always, I've spent countless days, years, and time thinking about what was I thinking, or everyone asks, what were you thinking during this? every meal you're thinking, or you're not, you're in the moment, you're with friends, you're having a good time. It's a birthday party. The last thing you're thinking is, oh my God, what is in this food? Can I have it? Is it safe? I grew up with a peanut allergy, and I never had any severe reactions my entire life up to 24 years old. There was maybe once or twice something happened when I was very young that we knew I had an allergy, but it was not an anaphylactic allergy. It was some hives, maybe some itching in my mouth, some sneezing, and some Benadryl knocked it out. I always had EpiPens on me. 9 out of 10 times the EpiPens were expired. I didn't really care. I had a very cavalier attitude towards it because I just simply, as anyone would say with allergies, you avoid the allergen. Sometimes that's not always possible, but I avoided it, and I went through all of pretty much my entire life up to 24 years old without having any significant situations. So at the birthday party, they start cutting up the cake, and they pass pieces around. It looked like a regular, normal chocolate cake. And I was even in, everyone's talking. You're in that mix. You're in that normal moment. You're not worried. You're not concerned with what you're eating or what you're doing, to the extent of, me looking at it and analyzing it and double checking, because you're at a birthday party. You're here, you're there, you're mixing it up. And I remember taking the first bite of that cake, and you just kind of like just a little bit on the fork. And I put it in my mouth, and I realized, I said, what is that? Now, you have to remember, I've never eaten nuts or peanuts. I don't know what they really taste like.
Wow.
I have an idea of the smell. When you walk in the grocery store, you can smell it, or you kind of have a sense, but I really, truly have never eaten or know the taste. And I remember just something in my mouth, and I remember that initial, oh my gosh, what happened? Did I just eat a peanut? Is there nuts in this? And then I look at the cake, and I realize there's nuts in the cake. There's peanuts in the cake. It was a peanut butter cake.
Wow.
And still to this day, I've never seen a peanut butter cake anywhere. But there happened to be one at this party. So I in the split second of that moment, I end up swallowing. And I end up swallowing that piece before my brain can register that I ingested a peanut. Again, I don't know what a peanut tastes like. I'm going off of what I assume it is. I kind of, there was some intuition that, okay, this was something bad. I think it was. And then after I immediately did that, I swallowed that small amount. I then looked in the cake and realized that there were nuts in there. That was not something I'd seen prior. I initially didn't have a reaction. My throat was a little itchy. My mouth was. I remember I went and got some Sprite from the bartender. So something, I'm like, oh, the carbonate, soda will solve that. That was it. And I said, you know what? I'm okay. I'm at the party. I don't want to freak anyone out. I'm just going to see, I'm all right. No big deal. It was a very small amount. I'll go home. It's a Sunday night. I'll sleep it off. I'll take a couple Benadryl. We'll be all set to go. And onward and upward, won't say anything. So I end up going home. This was at maybe 9 o'clock or so. I had the peanut. I ingested the peanut. I got home, getting ready for bed. I take a couple Benadryl. I'm all right. I'm still, at this point, I feel something could be wrong. It was more like, all right, let's just see how this goes. I'll be asleep. I'm going to take a couple Benadryl. We're going to knock this out. And I remember laying in bed and just, noticing that I wasn't able to get to sleep. And I was a little itchy. I was a little, my throat was a little heavy. My chest was heavy. I was a little more upbeat, a little more energized, blood was pumping a bit more. So something was definitely a little bit off. Even after I've taken 3 Benadryl, I should be kind of out, but I'm not. And I'm like, I'm laying here. I'm like, okay, well, maybe this isn't working. Let me go take a look in the mirror and see what's going on. So I remember I got up, and I wasn't, at this point, there was no panic. There was no concern, really. It was just kind of like, all right, we'll see what happens. And then I remember I walked into the bathroom and I flicked the light on. I remember the light coming on, like, oh, it's bright. And I looked in the mirror, and I had hives on my neck, was red, my face, on my arms, under my arms, my chest. My body was reacting. I was breaking out in a rash, really all over my body. And then I was like, okay, am I getting nervous? Because then I'm starting to think more. So this is, the theme from this moment on was, I'm between being rational of what's happening, what do I do in this situation? I've never been in this situation before, and is it going to be okay, or what do I need to do? Because I don't know what's going to happen. I've never had a severe allergic reaction. I don't know the steps. I don't know what can happen. I don't know what will happen. Will the Benadryl work? Will it not? And I'm always in this limbo of trying to make the best decision, and ultimately, like, what will save my life and what wouldn't, was what this was coming down to. But I did not know that at that time. It was still just, all right, I'm in discomfort now. And that discomfort within about a half hour went to be very severe. And I ended up going back, laying down, and I remember vividly laying in bed saying, all right, let me just see how my breathing is, because that's what could happen. My throat could close. I heard that's what it is. The throat closes, we have the epinephrine. So then I start digging for the EpiPen. And I pull it out of the cabinet, and of course it was expired by a couple months, like it's always been for the last 10 years. I've never used it. So I have the EpiPen. I'm like, okay, I got this. Breathing is getting more difficult now. Okay, this is getting more difficult. In the last 10 minutes, it's gotten much more difficult. I'm still able to breathe, but I'm doing and I'm kind of testing. I'm like, can I still breathe deep? Is it okay? Is this going to blow over? Is it just going to be bad for a minute? Do I need to take more Benadryl? What do I do? And this is when your mind starts racing. And I feel many people can relate to that moment where you say, okay, this is not going to resolve itself. I'm going to have to make some decisions. What are those decisions at this point? I'm having an allergic reaction. It's a Sunday night. Do I call 911? Do I go to the hospital myself? Do I use the expired EpiPen? Do I then have to go to the hospital? What happens after I use the EpiPen? Am I able to physically move? Can I then call 911? Does 911 carry epinephrine, the ambulance? How quickly will they get here? Can I handle this better myself? These are all scenarios I'm running through my head at this point, laying in bed or sitting up in bed, focusing on breathing. And I thought to myself, and I don't know how I necessarily came to this. I said, it's a Sunday night. In my head, I thought, I don't know if the ambulance will get here. I don't know what it is. I don't want to make a big scene. I don't know what's happening. I'm going to drive myself to the hospital. It's maybe only 15 minutes away, given it's a late Sunday night, 11:30, 12 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So there's no one on the road. I calendar-wise of having an NDE, it saved my life. This was a Sunday night, hands down. So I end up getting in my car, and I grab the EpiPen with me. I say, I'm going to bring this just in case. I'm going to have it with me. I grab my wallet, my phone, the EpiPen. I'm out the door. I'm driving. I remember driving. I threw my hazards on. I was flying down the road, not speeding, but I in my head, I was moving quicker, and I was running through scenarios, focusing on breathing. And at this point, it got more severe. It went from, okay, I'm concerned, to now I'm full on panic. Oh my gosh, I'm counting minutes. I'm counting breaths. How much longer? The situation's deteriorating rapidly, minute by minute. I mean, every minute felt like an hour at this point. And I'm just focused on getting to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. So I end up getting to the hospital barely in time. I remember getting out, and the valet was there, and I assume I handed him the keys, and I had my wallet with me, and that was it. I just had my wallet, and the EpiPen stayed on the car seat. And I go into the emergency room, and I walk up to the intake desk, and the nurse looks at me, and she goes, "Do you have any identification?" I have my wallet, and I open my wallet to pull out my driver's license, and I could not physically pull the license out of the little slot in your wallet. I couldn't do it. I fell into the counter, and I remember these vivid moments, and I remember her getting up and another nurse running around and then grabbing me. I'm about 6'2", 180. And they picked me up and they carried me. I mean, I was still walking a little bit, but they pretty much dragged/carried me right into the emergency room. And I just remember going right on a bed, and I had a swarm of people on me. I had a doctor, I had about 6 people, and they just cut my shirt and they started with the oxygen, and I said I had an allergic reaction. And I just remember laying there and them just going to work on me. And I was still aware at this point. And I was really, what I later found out a lot speaking with the medical staff and what was happening, I was slowly suffocating this entire time, more and more. My oxygen levels were dropping to nothing. I was not able to take in any air. My throat was closing more and more each time. Each minute that went by, each second, actually, each breath. And because there were times where I first went in, I was verbal. Then within a few minutes, I was unverbal. And I had Benadryl going in my wrist. I had epinephrine coming in through my neck and shoulder. I was on oxygen. They were doing everything they could. And I was laying there, and it's so interesting because I had, at this point, the concept of time went out the door, and I had all these different emotions. And I vividly remember laying there and thinking to myself, why is everyone so panicked working around me? Why are they frantic? What are they all doing? How are there 6 people around me? What could they all be doing? They're checking this, they're moving that, they're moving my eyes like this, they're trying to look in my mouth, they're holding my tongue down. And I remember the doctor looking at me, and he goes, at this point, the epinephrine was not working. So that's another medical point I later found out, is even though with EpiPens, which is the auto injector of epinephrine, which is the medicine that stops the anaphylactic reaction, they don't always work. That's why they always come in packs of 2 many times, or you may need a second dose. Or in many times, if you do not take the dose quick enough, it cannot reverse the reaction. That's really the main reason of why it doesn't work. So I, at this point later, found out I was on the cusp, and in many ways, I was too far gone that they could not reverse the anaphylaxis in that situation. And I remember the doctor looking at me and saying, we could try, we're going to put a tube down your throat to get you to breathe because you're not pulling in any oxygen. You're suffocating at this point. Your functioning's going down. And during all this, I was in a very blissful, euphoric phase, feeling, zone, whatever you want to call it. Again, it goes back to the language we don't always have. Mm-hmm. I was at peace. I was totally cool. I was just there. I was present, and I felt nothing.
Now, at that point, do you feel like you were still in your body at peace, or were you outside looking at your body and the doctors?
I did not have an outer body experience in the sense of being out of my body and looking down and watching. I was physically, language-wise, I was on my way out. And I remember a key moment where the doctor looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry, I can't save your life." Wow. And my response was, in my head, okay, I really no response. I didn't have any response. I remember vividly thinking to myself, and at that moment, and right around that moment, maybe slightly before, right in that phase of I'm dying, and that feeling of, oh, I'm dying. This is it. Like that was a clear as day moment of saying, oh, this is it. I'm dying. I had this acknowledgement that I was on my way out. And it was the most euphoric, that's the only word I can come up with, blissful feeling, state of being in that moment and that period of time. And it's interesting because there's nothing in this world, I say, that can replicate that feeling of acknowledging. You have the acknowledgement that, okay, I'm dying, this is it. And then that feeling of crossing over, we'll say, and knowing that's it. And when that happened, everything around me, there was no pain, everything was gone. And I remember these emotions washing over me like a wave, like you're in the waves in the ocean. And it was, I remember thinking like nothing material mattered. Yes, I'm laying here suffocating to death alone on a hospital bed on a Sunday night. No one knows I'm here. No family, no friends. I'm dying alone. That's one major fear people have in death. The other one of the painful death of I'm now suffocating to death and aware that I'm suffocating. I can't breathe. No oxygen's going in. I'm trying. It's just not getting in. It's just stuck. And while all that's going on, the dying alone, the suffocating to death, blissful state, euphoric state, acceptance.
I was going to say that.
Peace. And then I always grew up, fortunately I grew up in a very conscious family, open-minded family. And my parents always went to psychics and mediums, and that was something we grew up with. And it was, it was what we did. That was normal in our world. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I had my two grandfathers come to me after I had that wave of emotion of material things don't matter. Really only love matters. That's, that was really the two messages that came through. Boom, boom. That was through me. I was thinking that when I was going out, and that was just washing over me. And I was fully accepting death at that point. I knew I was out. I was gone. I was out of this world. Consciously, I was on my way. And my grandfathers came who were, one of them passed away a few decades before I was born. Another one passed away when I was about 2 or 3 years old. So one I had no relationship with. One I was 2 years old when he passed. So there was really nothing there as well. Mm-hmm. I knew it was them. I could feel it was them. They were there. And they very clearly, again, like this wave washing over. And it was, you can't die. You can't do it. You have work to do. You got relationships you got to work on. You got to fix. You can't. You got to go back. And at that moment, when that happened, something switched where I said, I don't want to die. Because up until that, I was like, I'm just out. I can't fight this. I just didn't. Not that I ever wanted to die. I was very happy. I love life. I just, that the moment carried me. I don't have words or to explain the acceptance. And then it turned into that encounter with my grandfathers I remember at that moment, it's switching. Once they said, you can't die, you have work to do. In my head, I was like, okay, you're right. I don't want to die. It shifted. I just switched back. And I remember saying, I don't want to die. I got to come back. And in that moment, when that happened, I snapped back into my body. The euphoric feeling, the peace, the bliss, I went right back in, and I went into excruciating pain, and I started gasping for air.
Wow.
I was back. And I remember moving, and the nurses and doctors were like, oh, he's moving, he's doing this. And I just was clawing at the mask on my chest. I said, I need oxygen. I'm back. I don't want to die. I started responding. I started fighting, scraping, grinding for oxygen. And anyone that's ever been in a position where you can't breathe, there's a special instinct that kicks in when you're trying to breathe and soak in. And I'm back, and I feel it. And it just 8.5 years later, that's that infinite little second of when I snapped in. I still remember as if it was 20 minutes ago. And I just was clawing, and I wanted the air. And then I was calming down, and I was pulling myself back together. I was responsive. I was able to move. I mean, I had so much epinephrine run through me. They were holding my legs down because I was shaking so much. Mm-hmm. Everything was kicking in. And I came back, and in all this moment, I'm not understanding really what's happening. I'm not understanding. I just spoke with my grandfathers. I'm not understanding, 5 minutes ago, whatever the concept of time was. I'll find out later what the time was I was actually in there and what was happening. I was just focusing on breathing and, surviving to the next breath. That's all it was. There was nothing else. It was just a pure survival instinct and fighting. And I within the next hour, I leveled off. I later found out it was about an hour. I was in the hospital for about 8 hours, actually. Didn't have any idea. 8 hours I spent there. I thought I was there for a half hour. I had no idea. I remember laying there and asking the nurse, I said, how long have I been here? 40 minutes? She said, you've been here for 8 hours.
Wow.
So for a half hour, we thought you were dead.
When you said that you saw your grandfathers, did you see them or did you just sense them? And if you saw them, did you see them like as young men, older men, what you remembered from pictures?
It was a sense, and through that sense, it was what I remembered them and felt them. I felt them before I saw them, but I knew it was them. If that, again, this is the one of the top ones where it's hard with the language, with the consciousness, and in that moment, the feeling and understanding and communicating is more than just seeing. It was more real than anything.
Right.
Which is hard because we don't communicate in this physical world like that. So to describe it, it's very hard when you've never had an experience where it just hits you. And, people that have had that experience, they understand where it's like, no, it was there. Like it was clear. It was a wave. I understood. There was full knowing. It was this person. This is what it was. It's never been so clear. But we don't communicate in this world like this, or we don't have experiences that really give us the experience of that to really articulate and give language to it. So as close as I can articulate what happened, they were there.
Yeah. Did they each?
It wasn't as if I was sitting in a room with them, but it was that energy, that feeling, and that communication was there going through me.
Most likely they spoke to you telepathically, but obviously it had to be telepathically. But did you feel like a distinctive sound to their voice? Like one grandfather had this, maybe a bass timbre. One of them had a medium timbre. Did you recall that at all?
I remember when I was calming down and I was coming back and still in this panic mode, I would call it, or coming in. I remember one of my grandfathers saying, take it easy, which is something he would say. So they carry the same personality over. So there was that. I mean, there's always humor everywhere, even when you're dying, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was a heartfelt moment. And that was the main experience within the NDE, the main spiritual of the actual NDE. And I always say the NDE is 5%, and 95% is what happens in the lifetime after.
Did you ever speak to the medical staff afterwards? And if you did you ever have any conversation like, well, yeah, you flatlined for a few minutes or anything like that?
I did not flatline, but I asked them when I left, and I found out the time I was there, about 8 hours. I remember only thinking I was there for around 40 minutes. I asked them how bad was I really, because I just remember stumbling in. That was it. And they said on a scale of 1 to 10, I was a 9, and they didn't think I was going to survive. And the woman said, she goes, you're unrecognizable from how you looked when you came in. Absolutely unrecognizable. She's like, I shocked you're getting up, and this is now 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock, 7, 8 hours later. And they kind of looked around. They said, do you want to go home? I said, all right, I'll go home. So they, gave me a piece of paper. They gave me this. I walked out and I said, thank you. And I had no idea what really went on. I was just like, oh my God, this was insane. My body is in unbelievable pain. I want to get home. I got this thing on my wrist. I got the little socks with the rubber on the bottom. I got a little piece of paper they gave me. They said, just take this when you walk out. And they're like, feel better. There's nothing else we can do.
Yeah.
And, I always joke, I really knew I was back to this world when I got out and I got my car and I had to pay for parking.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, there's no mistake.
What a way to bring you back to reality.
Yeah, of course. So I was back, and then, for several days afterwards, I was just in unbelievable pain all over. I remember just laying in bed the next day, just everything hurt, breathing hurt. Any movement hurt. My body was wrecked. And that went on for about 3-4 days. Then, that was the near death experience moment. And then you walk into the after effect, the integration, the understanding what happened. I had no idea up until really about 2 months after the near death experience what a near-death experience was. That was not a vocabulary. I had no idea what that was. I didn't know what it is. Nothing. I was just like, oh my God, this crazy event happened. I got really hurt from peanut. That was the language. That was what happened. There was no spirituality, no emotion, then you start piecing it all together. Then that's the entire other, the 95% is, okay, what happened? What's going on? Where are we going with this? And that was a process in itself, but that was the mechanism, and the near-death specific experience took place and ended, really that morning when I woke up. Because then once that physical pain was gone, then you deal with the emotional, mental, spiritual, cultural, all of that, which is what we discussed.
Right.
Moving forward.
I would say that over the next few days, did you start processing it, or did you process it immediately when you went home?
Yeah, that's a very good question. At this time, I had no idea what a near-death experience was, or that language. I wouldn't actually find that language or even know what that was till several months after. So after the physical pain subsided and I got out of bed and I was moving around, there were some things. I remember my vision was resetting. I remember I was just kind of like moving around slowly. Like I was kind of like, figuring everything out. And, what was really beneficial was this happened when I was 24. Since I was 14, I kept a journal. So I was journaling all the time during my near-death experience. And initially, I go back and look at it, there was no language of NDE. It was, I ate a peanut and I had a really bad anaphylactic reaction. For the next 6 months or so, I would wake up every day and I would have no idea who I was. Not in a sense of amnesia, but in a sense of understanding what I believed, what I valued, what I understood, who I was, my reaction to things, what I thought I wanted, what I didn't want. It was that. I remembered everything. I walked out pretty much unscathed. Within a few days, I was fine. I was back in a gym a week later, physically. Mm-hmm. Over the course of the next few weeks and months and even years, there was an unraveling and a rebuilding of a mental, emotional, spiritual being. Myself, again, for 6 months, I woke up, I had no idea really who I was. I mean, things would happen, there would be situations and I wouldn't know how I'd react, or I was different. And a few months later, after the NDE, I don't know, just a chance or a very fortunate, I stumbled across information on near-death experience, and I did the little online test, and I had like 26 out of the 27 traits of a near-death experience. I said, oh, okay. And I then contacted the group, which was IANS, and I said, hey, I'm over here in Los Angeles. I think I had a near-death. Is there anyone near-death experience? Anyone I can speak with? And they said, yeah, we have this woman. up in Santa Barbara you can talk with.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, all right, great. Like, give me your number. I don't know who I can bring this up with. I mean, again, I'm in a new city. I don't have any friends or family around. I've only been here for 4 months. It's just me. I'm here.
Right. Were you afraid to tell anybody?
No, I wasn't afraid. I didn't know what to tell anybody. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what happened. Mm. I was very vague, and even up until this point, I still am pretty vague unless someone just looks up and sees me speaking about what really happened. And, I'll go into that a little bit later. But I didn't know because I didn't know how to describe anything. I just said, hey, I had a reaction to a food allergy. Mm. That was it. And the conversation stopped at that with everybody. If they even knew, if it even came up, it even happened with friends. And I remember it really did it. I didn't have a lot to talk about. There was no need to discuss it. Mm-hmm. Now, in the coming weeks and months after, I'm a hot mess putting this all together of realizing what happened. And then more is coming back. I'm starting to remember, oh, this happened with the grandparents. Oh, this happened in the bed. Oh my God, this is really what happened. I almost died. Or I was there. Consciously, I passed over. Then you start to realize once the shock wears off of what happened, oh my gosh, this was really intense. I'm putting it all together. And then you start processing, and that's to this very moment an ongoing process for me. And I just, in the big picture of looking at the integration, I went on with life. I spoke with that woman and she said, oh, honey, you had an near-death experience. So, okay. Then what? Yeah. Well, that's kind of the question. Right. Then what? Yeah. You got to get back on with life. I'm 24 at the time. I was starting a career out in real estate in Los Angeles, and you're growing into adulthood. And then on top of it, you just have a near-death experience. So I start gobbling up information and trying to make peace of this. And then you say, well, okay, where do I go from here? What matters to me? What doesn't? Do I want to talk about it? Mm-hmm. I never talked about this NDE, and most people still don't know about it, that I had one, and it's 8.5 years later. I did not discuss this. There was a moment where I attempted to, and I couldn't. I didn't have the language, and it was something I didn't speak about. There were moments in the past few years where people have asked, they knew I had a really bad allergy and said, hey, do you want to talk about it? I said, I just don't. Like, it stopped there. Like, it did not talk about it. People asked, it was no. Mm-hmm. Period. And that was it. And it wasn't a situation where I felt like I couldn't discuss it because of society or culture or my friends and family. I couldn't discuss it. So when I hear someone says, hey, they didn't talk about something for 30, 40 years, 50 years, I get it. This is still challenging right now for me to discuss this. Mm-hmm. Because I'm still in it. I still am integrating it. I'm still feeling the trauma. I still know what that feeling comes back. And it's something anyone that's had a near-death experience deals with all the time. It never leaves. I mean, there's rarely a day that goes by where I don't think about it. It doesn't come up, and you have to find ways to deal with it. And over the course of the last few years, I've done everything from sound baths, meditation, sweat lodges, any and all holistic work and spiritual development to really process a complete mind, body, emotional shift, to be able to speak about this and to be able to grow and to take the blessing of it and the gratitude and then see what comes out of it. I'm very fortunate. I could have easily, 1, died, 2, been severely handicapped, suffocating, brain damage. I didn't. I walked out. That's a miracle in itself. To wake up every day and know that you, in one way, shouldn't be here. I was given a second chance completely. I am, in gratitude of that and given a second opportunity at life, because I shouldn't have had one, or I should have been severely handicapped. And there was a young woman a few months after I had my anaphylactic. She went into anaphylactic, and I lost touch with the family, but up until a few years ago, she was still in a vegetative state, and she was like a year older than me.
Wow.
And I've always kind of realized, I walked out, and she never did anything else ever again. So I'm very fortunate, and it's a very grounding experience, and it's really shaped who I am with the concept of gratitude, and how finite life is, and how quickly it can change within an absolute second. It took less than a second for me to eat that peanut. It takes less than a second for people's lives to change drastically, for everything to be turned upside down. And you understand how precious life is, and really how amazing it is. I remember walking and just seeing these flowers and being so overjoyed with tears, being able to smell a rose. Like, I would have never even acknowledged that rose prior. But I remember after the near-death experience, sometime that summer, having this moment with a rose and flowers, and taking that time to really be present and work through and integrate a near-death experience. And it's been an absolute blessing. It's been a lot of challenging. It's been extremely challenging. A lot of NDers speak about how amazing and wonderful. I mean, it's still been very difficult. It's been, lonely at times dealing with it. It's been confusing. It's been frightening. Having a food allergy, anytime I ever eat, I know what could happen. Even though I have EpiPens, I have Benadryl, I have all this stuff now to save myself, and I know what to do, and I'm more cautious than ever. There's still that fear that death is always lurking, and how close you came. And then you realize later on, like, oh my God, ignorance is bliss when this initially happened. And it's been a really difficult journey. Again, I did not speak about this up until like 6 months ago, 7 months ago. It never came out. It was not discussed. I could not speak about it. I was asked to many times, and by groups, by friends, and the answer was no. And it was that. I was very strict. It was a direct no. It wasn't a nice, I'm not going to talk about it. It was a no. Right. So it was really tough. It was a really difficult time, and there's still challenges I face and I work through, and I deal with it. And there's the physical aspect of it, then the emotional and the spiritual, and then you're in your 20s, growing up and trying to create your career, and relationships are very, very difficult. Having a near-death experience, I mean, how do you bring that up to someone? How do they understand when they say, "Oh, you're a little bit different. You look at things differently"? It's very hard to relate to many people, especially if they're not open. They don't understand it. And I've had experiences across the board where some people are very open, understand, other people don't want to hear about it, or they hear about it and then they don't know. So there's always that, I know my audience and what I can and can't say, and I keep it, I'm just sharing my story. I'm not looking to say I have any answers to the universe, or I have all these grand messages. I just, live the best I can, and am still very much in this integration and process, and dealing with it. And there are times where I remember a few years ago at like a 7-year mark, it's like the other shoe dropped, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, everything in my head's exploding again. And it's a process. It is. I'm still in it now, and I'm not upset about it. I'm not, angry. I'm fortunate to be here, and I look at it as a great blessing. And, I don't get a tremendous amount of enjoyment speaking about it, because it is very difficult. It's difficult to sit here and speak and talk to you about this. And I thought to myself, I did it once or twice. And I mean, white knuckling it. I'm still kind of white knuckling to going through a lot of this. And it helped. I felt it really kind of pushed the energy along for me. And I thought, you know what? I'm here. There are so many people that did not get the break I got, that they didn't wake up, they didn't come back, or they did, they're not coming back the same person. And this is going to be my give back. If I do this in service, and that's why I do this. If I always say, if one person can benefit from this, if one person can find peace, acceptance, whatever that may be, if I can help in any way, it's worth it. And that's why I put myself out here. I speak about it. I go into it. I talk about these extremely personal, deep, intimate, painful, violent moments that I'm still actively working through. It's, it's not all rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah.
And if that can help someone, then it's worth it. I look at this as doing it in service, and I've met some fantastic people, and I've been helped because I've heard other NDEers speak, and it's really helped me. And that is so important. It's just those little moments. Someone may say something, or a connection, or an understanding, and it's really beautiful. And that's why I do this. It's in service, and it's really tough, but I do feel it helps me. And if I can help others, absolutely. That's why I'm here.
It's a pretty common answer when I ask NDE experiencers, do they fear death? And most of them, I think maybe even all of them, but most of them will say no. Do you anymore?
Prior to the near-death experience, I never thought about it. I just don't. I don't have any fear of death. I don't look at death as final. I think that's probably the main reason why. And people I've spoken to look at death as final, or, oh my God, what it is. Having had the experience I've had, and, being open to consciousness, and whether it be, with mediumship abilities or intuition, I just look at it as it's a different state of being. You have reincarnation, you have all these different avenues that have been discussed for hundreds of years. And I don't look at death as final. And I feel that is where many people get hung up on, is that, oh my God, it's final. Where I don't see that. And I see it's open, or there's something beyond that. We don't know what it is. We don't really have an ability. But to go back to that question, I try and live in the moment, and I try and be present, and I try and be here, because we're here for such a short amount of time.
Right.
And it's so precious, and it could be gone in a second. So the other answer is, I don't have time to think about death. I have things I have to do now.
Right.
That's really what it is.
Yeah.
I don't have that luxury.
Right. It's interesting, because from what I understand and the way I'm interpreting you, you have had that amazing experience, and now you have knowingness that there is no finality and consciousness continues. But then on the human level, you've had this almost traumatic accident that happened to you. So you still kind of deal with maybe like, oh no, I better be more cautious of what I eat, because what if this happens again? Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. There is a balance that I feel many experiencers have, and certainly for myself daily, is, my background's real estate. I'm in business. I love business. And then there's also a part of me that just says, I don't want to do any of this. I don't care. I can go be a hippie and live in a van at the beach. Mm-hmm. You still have to live in this world. And that's where a lot of the challenge comes in. Mm-hmm. You still have to be grounded. You still have to work. You still have to, I'm still figuring that out. Where's the balance? Yeah. The idea of working, I'm self-employed, but the idea of working, in a giant company and, 9 to 5, I don't want to do that. I kind of just want to hang out with my friends, have great experiences, and travel the world. Mm-hmm. That's what I want to do. I've been to the point where I said, well, if you're on your deathbed, what would you want to say you want to do? that's what I want to do. I've been there. I suffocated. I know what matters. Sending the extra emails or, working extra at night really doesn't matter. And it's tough because you have to function in this world. And I like nice things and I want to be able to do a lot and I want to be able to give back. And I always said, if I had $1 billion, I'd give 950 of it away. So that is very challenging because it's like, where do you find the balance? And is there really balance, or is it just finding a lifestyle that works for that, where you are able to sustain yourself financially and within your community, but also then give back and also then have time for the things you care about, whether it's travel, leisure. And I've boiled it down to, my idea is to wake up and do it, is to move. And I've had to you have to like remodel everything. And that's part of it. Again, you start off, in your early 20s. I moved to Los Angeles to be in real estate, then you wake up like a few months later and you're like, wait a second, none of that appeals to me. I don't care anymore. None of that matters. And everyone says, well, there's just that cliche saying of what do you do on your deathbed? I've been there and I have a very clear understanding of what matters. And that's experiences, people, and that's what I care about. Yeah. And it's tough. We have a very, we have a world that doesn't always value that. And it's tough to sometimes, with all the influences coming in of society and the world and all the kookiness, to still be grateful, grounded, and live the purposeful life that is authentic to yourself, that other people may not agree with. It may not work for them. They may not understand, and that's fine. People have lives that I don't want, they don't want mine, and there's no judgment. Everyone it should live their authentic self. So really trying to figure that out. And that's been a lot of the integration as well, is understanding what works for me, what doesn't, what I thought at one point did, because I had a blueprint. I had what I really wanted. Then all of a sudden it flips overnight. I go, wait a second. Now I care about what? I didn't know. I just woke up with a different set of values and understanding and what really mattered. And it's been really beautiful. It's been great. I feel many people, or you always read these articles that at the end of the life, they realize what really matters. They have these regrets. And I can say up until this point, I haven't regretted anything. I've always went for it. Doesn't mean it always worked out. A lot of the times it doesn't, whether it be business or people or experiences. At least I went for it, and I'm okay with that. The beauty is, I've sometimes joked to close friends around me. I say, well, when you've suffocated to death alone, what else is there really to be afraid of or concerned about? Yeah. Just doesn't register with me because I've gone so much further and beyond. I'm okay. I'll deal with it. I've dealt with life or death, not in a cliche way, but I have. And everything else doesn't really seem that significant or detrimental if you're making a decision about life, business, or relationships, having gone somewhere so extreme and such as a near-death experience. Right.
And I think you just have an experience that fundamentally changes you. A lot of ears kind of say they pierce the veil, but that's kind of a common way that they say it. You just kind of tipped into the other side and popped back.
Yeah, I like that language. That's like I cracked open the door a little bit and looked in and came back.
Right.
But absolutely, there was a complete rebuild mentally, emotionally, spiritually, ideas, beliefs I held, everything. Right. Everything. And it was tough. It was not a beautiful, amazing, wonderful story journey to put it all back together. Right. I want to stress that it was difficult. It was lonely. It was difficult. It was challenging. It was trying to, again, pull in the language. It was just to the point where I had no idea what was going on. And there was no rubric. There was no, you had an NDE. Every 25-year-old has that. That's normal. It wasn't like you go through puberty where every 13-year-old's kind of going through the same thing. Like this was very unique. And especially in the way it happened. Mine was very violent. Very violent.
Yeah.
And it's something that it wasn't, it wasn't like a one-off event. It was something that it was done through eating. We have to eat 3 times a day or more. We need that to live. Yeah. So, that's also the component as well. Is now, I walk around, people, what people have for snacks. They used to give out, maybe some airlines on for snacks on an airplane, kills me. A peanut will kill me. I'm dead in 30 minutes now.
Yeah.
So you have that constant reminder as well, and that constant grounding. And someone close to me had an allergy to tomatoes. Someone close to me. She still does. And growing up, she had a fear of tomatoes. So she would walk around a grocery store holding these tomatoes in her basket. Mm-hmm. And that really helped me. So there were times when I'm really off base. I haven't done this in a few years, but initially, I would put peanuts in my grocery bag, like a bag of it, or something with peanuts in it, or nuts or walnuts. I mean, it was perfectly sealed up, and I'm not opening it. It was like a sealed, and I would just keep it there. And I had to have a conversation. And I said, listen, and that was a way to process and really understand, because this is something that is all around me all the time, and it's not going anywhere. And that's it. That's the deal. So there's always that reminder of how fragile life is.
Have you considered that your grandparents are always close by, since that you popped out and they were there pretty quickly, and this appears to be an accident that wasn't supposed to happen, so they were already there and just said, hey, you got to go back, you've got stuff to do?
Absolutely. I do. I feel my grandparents, and I have a very strong intuition as well as mediumship ability and psychic ability that really I probably always had it a little bit prior to the near death, and then once that happened, it really shot up. And then in the past years, I've worked with coaches to really develop it more. I absolutely think they're there. I can kind of tap into it. I think they're there. I think they're there for everybody. I think it's just the ability, if you're on and open, you can receive. They're there for everybody, and that's my feeling.
Right. Yeah.
It's just, again, it goes back. Are you open, or do you receive? Do you believe in it? Some people don't. Some people, they can't connect. Or I feel society is moving more towards a higher consciousness and more of an understanding that, wait, death is not final. Mm-hmm. And we're realizing that more because medicine's bringing people back to life.
Yeah.
More than ever.
Right.
With medical advances. So I feel they're always there, and I feel they're there with everybody. Everyone has their loved ones around them. You may not be able to see them. They may not be like it was when they were alive and next to you, but their energy and their consciousness is still there, whether you can see it, feel it, or believe it or not. It's there. Mm-hmm. I feel.
You said before earlier that you grew up in a family and you guys were into mediums or kind of paranormal stuff, and you just mentioned that you've kind of developed some abilities. So if you can kind of elaborate more, do you think you had any abilities before? And if so, what were they? And if they have improved now, how have they changed?
Yeah. So I the language I would use pre-NDE, we'd say, and not having a full understanding. I was very intuitive, very open, had a natural curiosity towards the consciousness community. Then the NDE happened. Then it kind of just ripped the roof off the house with the ability to kind of get that connection to spirit world, or that information, or that frequency, or that high consciousness. Then over time, it kind of came in more and more. And then in the last several years, I've focused on working on it, whether it be classes, one-on-one training with other psychics and mediums. Mm-hmm. And I don't do it professionally. My skill level depending on if I'm on with sleep and diet and grounding and meditation, professional level, but it's not something I want to do professionally. I look at it, I use it now really just for myself. And there are times like I'll read for my family or I can I'd send like group emails and just write everything in and for stuff, or my family will sometimes check with me on different things if I can pull it in or go from there. Or, every once in a while I might just say, oh, this came through and so, or this, and that's it. And it's not something I actively disclose at all. I don't bring it up. I don't bring it up, around. And I use it for myself. I use it for, business, life decisions. What should I do? Where should I go? Every little thing. It's just something. It's a tool. It's part of, I look at it as just another ability or again, a language. I don't want to use the word advantage, but it's a skill. It's a natural ability that then with practice and the right, you're on. And listen, there's times I'm totally wrong. There are times I am so right. I'm like, whoa. So it's interesting. It's fun. It's just become normal. It's not like it's this crazy thing I do or have the ability of, because it's who I am. And I look at moments or decisions. I attempt to always look at it through an intuitive lens, whether that be just meditating, thinking it through, grounding it out, talking out to myself, or, my eyes will go up and to the right. And that's how I know I'm really making an intuitive based decision, because I'm like going to my subconscious. I'm like, what's it going and I can kind of play it out. And that's what I've developed over the last several years. And I use that to just try and, process, make decisions, the best decisions I can. And some are right, some are wrong. And that's that.
Since your grandfather's told you you have work to do, have you come into any conclusions what you think that work should be? I have not. I don't get hung up on that question. I feel that it'll just kind of present itself. And what I can say is, going back to what I spoke about earlier, the idea of service and speaking that's some work I'm going to tie. And I thought, I said, what, if I was blessed and fortunate enough to be able to come back and have the ability to speak and have this avenue, that's my give back. That's the main driver behind speaking and going into this and talking about consciousness, spirituality, near-death experiences. And that world is to, it's very niche. It's very, very niche. And in my experience, I've spoken with so many people that said I couldn't speak to anyone else. No one understands. Here's what happened, or this happened. I lost a loved one. I lost a child. I'm lost. And there's just something that resonated. I don't know what within this story or other near-death experience stories that brings comfort, peace, and some healing. And if I can, again, bring any of that, that's great. That's great. That's at this moment, that's my give back and my service to humanity and community. I don't believe you have a website. I think you just only have a Facebook. And are you willing, or do you interact with people if they want to talk to you, or are you more of a private person?
Yeah, I'm one of the few people out there. I don't have a lot of social media. I just recently got Facebook. I'm on there. I'm very easy to find. Anyone who reaches out to me, I always make it a point to reach out back. So anyone wants to reach out, send me a message. I will get back to you as soon as I can.
Oh, great.
That's my promise.
Do you have any projects or anything that you're working on that you would like us to know about?
At the moment, I don't. I just started this journey of being very public about speaking. And, it's, again, for 8 years, I'd never talked about it. So we like we said earlier before this, I'm just starting to get into the swimming pool on this. Like I'm just up to my ankles right now. I'm keeping all options open. I'm just having a great time speaking with you, Jeff, and other hosts and other speaking events and their groups. And I've spoken several times at IANS at the national conference, as well as several local chapters through California, Colorado. I did a video with Anthony Chen in France that has been doing very well. I think we're up to like 140,000 views. I have another video with like 50,000. So to kind of go from not telling anyone about this to having over a couple 100,000 views of my story, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. I mean, the cat's out of the bag, and I'm okay with that. But it's been great. I've spoken to people all over the world that have reached out and support, and it's just been really fantastic. And I'm open to where this will eventually lead. But right now, I'm just saying yes to opportunity and putting myself out there and doing the best I can. That's great. Are you still practicing? Well, I don't know if you use the word practice, but are you still a realtor? Yes, I'm still in real estate. I'm also in the Medicare field as well, so I do both. All right, so at least I can plug you and say, guys, if you're in the Los Angeles area and you need a realtor, well, I'm in Florida. Chris is your guy. I'm in Florida. Oh, you're in Florida. Yeah, okay, well, if you're in Florida, Chris is your guy. But I can still help with LA. So anything anyone needs, just have them reach out to me. There you go. All right. Well, before we wrap it up, is there one final message that you want to leave us with? You know, I get asked that, and I would say two things always come to mind. If we just focus on gratitude and kindness, that would change the world. That would change yourself, your community, and everything. I feel we get so wrapped up and we have to have these grand, amazing plans that has to be so complicated and convoluted, and it's not. It is so simple. We all know what to do. It's not an issue of knowing what to do, but it's actually an issue of just doing it. And I would say if we focus on kindness and gratitude, that would do wonders for ourselves, community, and everyone. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I totally agree with that. Chris, I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. I appreciate how open you were, how vulnerable, how expressive you were, just sharing your life with us. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Jeff. Thank you. You have a great show, and fortunate you reached out. I'm glad we could put this together. Yes. All right, Chris. Well, have a great evening. You too. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.